Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Anine Dormel, standing in for Eben Janssen. The show is live and broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Now, the human rights watchdog Amnesty International has approved a policy to endorse the decriminalization of the sex trade. Today, we talk to South Africa's Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force about this, and we ask you, is it time for South Africa to decriminalize sex work? Send your views to @SABC Newsroom on Twitter. More than 40% of South African households are being headed by women, and we talk women in finance with the Office of the Credit Ombud. Then, nearly 1 million people have been affected by widespread flooding across Myanmar and Southeast Asia, and we see what the World Food Programme is doing to help. We close today with the Land Rover Africa Cup tournament, as Africa's best polo players and ponies will be in action this weekend. But first, here's a look at the day's news. In Limpopo, at least 12 people have been killed in a collision between a minibus taxi and a stationary truck on the N1 South near Krankstor Plaza outside Bella Bella. The crash occurred around 1 o'clock this morning. As the cause of the crash is still being investigated, we now cross to the scene of the accident to get an update from SABC reporter Michael Moringa. Michael, can you hear me? Well, we'll get an update from him later on that story. Carrying on with our headlines. Parliament will today debate the Marikana report by the Farlam Commission. It investigated circumstances leading to the death of 44 people at Lonmin's Marikana mine in August 2012. Yesterday, 8 of the country's 9 provincial police commissioners apologized for expressing their public support for the National Police Commissioner, General Ria Piega. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa says the new visa regulations are essential. The new regulations, which came into effect last month, are aimed at improving the country's security. Ramaphosa, who was answering questions in the National Assembly yesterday, says changes will be made to make the regulations more efficient. Opposition parties have argued that the new changes have a negative effect on the country's tourism industry. Government's Operation Phakisa will come under the spotlight today. President Jacob Zuma is expected to give a progress report on the program. Operation Phakisa, based on a Malaysian socio-economic development model, is part of government's plans to fast-track economic transformation and job creation. Talks between the National Union of Mine Workers and AMCU are expected to continue in Boksburg in Ekurhuleni today. The final round of negotiations will determine whether there is a settlement or strike. The final offer by each company has ensured entry-level employees would receive 12,800 Rand and 13,200 Rand per month by the third year of the agreement. Then a fatal shack fire has claimed 3 lives at the Hout Bay in Cape Town Peninsula. This is the 3rd incident in 2 days. Yesterday, 7 people from the family were killed in Port Elizabeth and another 2 at Sea Cow Lake in Durban. And in northeast China, smoke continues to rise from the site where 2 massive explosions earlier occurred. 17 people have been killed and around 400 injured in the explosions that ripped through an industrial area. The massive blast was caused when a shipment of explosive being stored in a container detonated. Well, earlier we wanted to cross to our SABC reporter Michael, who is on the scene of an accident this morning. Michael, I just want to know, can you hear me loud and clear now? Good morning, Michael. Well, unfortunately, we still don't have him on the line, but Now to our top story today. Earlier this week, Amnesty International approved a controversial policy to endorse the decriminalization of the sex trade, rejecting complaints from some women's rights groups who say it's tantamount to advocating the legalization of pimping and brothel owning. Tomorrow in Dublin, the human rights watchdog will finally endorse the decriminalization of the sex trade. From there, the organization will go on to lobby governments around the world to accept its point of view. Now, in South Africa in Women's Month, the rights of sex workers has not only been marginalized, but has not been highlighted. Today at Newsroom, we ask what significance National Women's Month has for the female commercial sex worker in South Africa, and what this new policy could mean for them. From the Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force, or SWET as we know them, we're joined by Gauteng's Provincial Manager, Diane Masawe. Diane, I thank you for joining us today.
Good morning to you, Anine, and to your viewers.
Definitely some interesting news happening.
Positive news, yes, coming from Amnesty International.
Definitely, definitely. So, firstly, of course, I want to ask you what your views on this are, SWET.
I mean, initially when we heard that they were looking to either support or not support the decriminalization of sex work, as an organization, we were hoping, and partners, that they would support the decriminalization of sex work, because we see this as the only, policy or framework that actually protects sex workers internationally. I think in terms of their policy and some of their recommendations, they are not saying they want to support pimping or brothel keeping, but what they're saying is what makes sense for sex workers is for their trade to be decriminalized. And one of the main reasons why they have critiqued against legalization is because under a legalized model, you still have state control, and you can still have a two-tier system that's happening, and people who do not abide to the regulations are still criminalized, which still then doesn't address people's human rights.
We know there are still so many stigmas attached, so many people against this type of work. So what I want to ask you, is South Africa going to be one of those governments that are going to sit up and listen and really take this issue seriously, seeing that what is being suggested now?
I mean, we hope so. And I think this year we've seen a lot of positive moves from our government. The fact that the Law Reform Commission has been tasked to submit their paper, and we're told they are in the process of submitting it to the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. At the World AIDS Day conference, the Deputy Minister and the Minister spoke positively about sex work and the need to work with sex workers and to reduce stigma and to ensure that people are accessing, health services. So I think the government is listening. And I think there's also been a lot of positive move in the country, not only by sex workers, but women's organizations and other organizations to say it's about time, the government does, do what's in the best interest for women. And seeing that this is Women's Month, this is a women's issue. And I think women's organizations who don't support sex workers because of the trade must look to say what is in the best interest for women in terms of their rights in this country.
Now, Diane, being from SWET, you'll know that it's not always the case that women who work within the sex trade are there by choice.
Yes.
So tell us more about that. I mean, how many members do you have? And tell us some of the cases that you see within the trade.
I mean, in terms of members, I'm not able to, to pinpoint a figure, because we work with all sex workers. So even sex workers who don't support the model that we work under, we support. Even sex workers who we don't have access to, when they do call us, we will support. But I think in terms of some of the main issues, and yes, sex work is not the first choice for a lot of women, but it is a choice that people make out of limited options. The reality is a lot of sex workers in this country are supporting between 3 to 4 people. A lot of sex workers are heading single-headed households. They're supporting their families. And so for them, although this might not be the first option, it's an option that makes economic sense. Back in 2008, ISS and SWET did a study that looked to say, and in that study we spoke to 208 sex workers in Cape Town, granted. And one of the questions that was asked is, what's your level of education? And how much do you earn making doing sex work? And then they spoke to economists to say, at somebody with this level of education, how much could they earn if they were not in sex work? And the economists said people earn up to 4 times more doing sex work. The reality is a lot of sex workers are doing this to survive and to support their families.
There's still so much resistance, and I know we've had you on the show before. We even had one of your members talking about the way they are being treated by police. Yes. So with a policy like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that their rights are going to be respected. And I'm almost wondering that there could even be more discrimination, seeing that if we do go ahead and legalize something like this, wouldn't it in some cases lead to someone caring less about your rights?
I mean, I think the amnesty position is decriminalization and not legalization. And I think under a decriminalized model, there will be a lot more respect for the sector because the sector will be treated like any other sector. I think one of the challenges that sex workers have when sex work is criminalized is the fear of coming forward to report rogue police officers or bad clients, because you then fear, one, for the stigmatization, but also you then fear outing yourself as a criminal and risk prosecutions. So I'll give an example of a country like New Zealand where it's decriminalized, and we've gone to do site visits, we've gone for learning tours in New Zealand, and the police actually treat sex work like work. Police will go into brothels, they'll ask street-based sex workers what concerns and issues they've got, and they're able to then respond faster when there are bad clients or when there are poor working conditions in brothels.
Well, Diane, just quickly to wrap up, what campaigns are you busy with from Sweat's side, just to shed some light on what it is that your members stand for and what they do?
I mean, in terms of Women's Month, at our head office last week, there was a big event around, respecting sex workers' rights. But other than that, what we've done is we've asked other organizations to include us in their activities so we can start, speaking to a wider range of people. I think when we as an organization have our own events, we are almost speaking to the converted. Whereas if we have, trade unions or other big organizations inviting us, we're able to then speak to a variety of people that we wouldn't have access to. But I think in terms of Women's Month, what we as an organization are asking for is that the rights of sex workers are respected. I'm not saying that, this is a profession that people, want to get into. And even anybody, you don't have to understand why someone is doing sex work. But what you need to do is to say what is in the best interest of a human being, and that is to protect their human rights, regardless of whether you support what they do or you don't.
Yes, definitely. Well, Diane, I thank you, and I thank you for the work that you're doing. And that's Diane Masawe from Sweat. She's Gauteng's provincial manager. Now, massive explosions have hit China's northeastern city of Tianjin, leaving at least 17 people dead and hundreds more injured. Let's take a look at what you've been saying. Remember, you can send your views to us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. There we see Bucky says, "My thoughts go out to those who were affected by the explosions. Please stay safe." Yes, definitely some sad news coming from China. This tweet says, "Pray for Tianjin. Hope everything is fine. When I saw the news, I can't imagine how bad the explosion is. But the pictures are so sad. R.I.P. Roberta says, "My condolences to the people of China as they deal with the aftermath of the devastating explosion." Melissa says, "Oh my goodness, I hope everybody is okay. I'm praying for them." Yes, definitely thinking of all of the lives lost in China. And there you see pictures coming in from that explosion. We know that the death toll could still be rising of what happened there. And that is the picture of the day coming in from Twitter, the one you see. Or this is the one you're going to be seeing on your screen. The picture comes from RT captioned, "Firefighting halted in Chinese port as hundreds are still missing and some have died." Now, South Africa has one of the highest credit ratings in the world. And according to recent reports, women do not fall too far from the so-called sad stereotype. Of course, the so-called shopaholic. But this does not mean all women are reckless spenders. According to the latest report by the Credit Ombuds, almost half of South African households are headed by women, with some finding it difficult to make ends meet. In keeping up with the theme of Women's Month, the Office of the Credit Credit Ombud is doing its part to assist women to become financially independent and to better handle their money. Joining us in studio is the Credit Ombudsman Case Manager, Evita Nofal. Evita, I thank you for joining us today in studio.
Thank you, Anine, and thank you for having the Credit Ombud on your show.
Definitely an interesting statistic that we're looking at. I mean, traditional roles have definitely changed. We're saying that in 40% of South Africa's households, women are now managing the finances. Let's just firstly talk about that change and talk about the financial decisions that we see them making.
Absolutely. Look, predominantly, we've always known that women were the caregivers of the household. The man went to work, he brought money home, and ultimately managed the finances. That has largely shifted. Women have taken a far more proactive role in career. They have become more money conscious, but with that has come a price. Inevitably, women have been taking care of their households. They're now taking care of finances for their households, and credit becomes a forefront runner. And the reasoning there too is most times women are the ones that will look to the kids, would look to the groceries, as mundane as that is. But where before it was cash orientated, now it's credit. Credit is easy, credit is fast. So women are more often looking now to credit to assist in the household, to assist in their careers. I mean, it's so often easily said that don't look to your neighbors to see what they have, live within your means.
Yes.
But unfortunately, the society that we're living in at the moment has given women the opportunity to take credit. And with that comes that responsibility of having to pay this back.
Doesn't it also come down to, I mean, if we look at the economic situation we have currently in South Africa, some women are actually turning to making credit in terms of like just keeping things afloat within the household. And how many cases do we see that? And even single mothers who aren't necessarily earning what a male breadwinner will be earning.
No, absolutely. There's a paradox in that respect. Women are having to source more finance to maintain their households. At grassroots levels, women are looking to paying off school fees for their kids. And with the amounts of school fees that are now applicable, women inevitably go and take credit. It's very important to note that women must be proactive. Continue being proactive. If you find that there is a situation where you can no longer pay your debt for any reason, contact the credit provider. Make some sort of payment arrangement with them. If for any reason that credit provider is not prepared to assist you in any way, or your account has been handed over to a debt collector or an attorney's firm to collect thereon, be proactive again. Contact them, make arrangements. If there's no sort of assistance that you're receiving from those credit providers, debt collectors or attorneys, our offices, the Credit Ombud, can assist.
Yes.
I mean, our offices offer free assistance. So we will assist non-bank credit matters and also credit bureau listings. You know, so often we find that women, again, we go back to the grassroots here. Women are trying to assist in their households. They want good jobs. They've studied or they want to study and they cannot, they do not have finance to do so. You go and take credit or a student loan, or you're looking for a job, for example, and credit bureau listings come to the front in this respect. When you approach an employer, they will inevitably ask you to give them consent to apply, to look at your credit profile. And women are not aware of the fact that when they default on an account, you've already, in terms of the initial contract you've had with the service provider or the credit provider, consented to that credit provider and service provider providing information to the credit bureau.
Yes.
So when you've approached that employer, subsequently, that employer is going to pick up on your defaults, and they're going to see that inevitably your payment profile is not kosher. Now, in that respect, also, again, be proactive. I mean, our offices can assist. If you've gone through to the bureau and they've not assisted you or they've not resolved your matter, come through to our office. we will assist you.
We'll definitely have to make sure that we put up those details. And I'd
Yes.
also like to ask, is it that fraudsters are now targeting women because we see that clothing accounts are being opened in maybe your name that you're not aware of? How can women not fall victim to this?
Yes, you've raised a very important point. We've had an instance recently at the Credit Ombud where a consumer, a woman, was surprised that she was being contacted by a number of credit providers, all saying that she owes money. She knows that she didn't apply for any of those credits, and she came through to the Credit Ombud. We investigated the matter. We liaised with the different credit providers, and it was actually established that this was fraud that was perpetrated. So what we did in this instant is we requested the consumer rather, to provide us with an affidavit setting out that she did not apply for these loans, these contracts. We then requested her to provide us with an ID with those informations and a specimen of her signatures. We provided these to the credit providers. They then had an opportunity to look through these. In consultation with our officers, they agreed that this was fraud, and they agreed to then write off these debts. Also, very importantly, they then sent a request to the Credit Bureau to have this woman consumer's details expunged.
Yeah, well, Vita Nofal from the Credit Ombudsman. Like I said, we will be putting up your details for those who need to get in touch with you. But we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Anine.
It's time now to take a look at the front pages from around the globe. Starting in the United Kingdom, The Guardian reports that dozens of people are feared dead, and a raging fire is still busy causing damages there as dangerous chemicals exploded in the northeast of China, sending a mushroom cloud into the air. Moving to the United States, the U.S. Today also leads with that story. At least 44 people died, including 12 firefighters, after two massive explosions ripped through a warehouse facility in one of the world's biggest ports. And finally, in New York, the International New York Times says about 1,000 refugees have been locked in a stadium on the Greek island of Kos overnight without food and with very little water, as Greek authorities struggle to contain the rising tide of migrants from war-torn countries. Let's take a look now at what's happening around the country. Today we start in Port Elizabeth, where Christopher Panayotou and his remaining co-accused are expected to appear in the magistrate's court. Panayotou is accused of masterminding his wife Jade's kidnapping and murder. Luthando Siyoli, who played a crucial part in the kidnapping, has now officially turned state witness. And in Johannesburg, the trial of 8 former police officers implicated in the death of Mozambican taxi driver Mido Masia is expected to continue. One of the accused has been criticized of not conducting himself professionally while arresting Masia. Masia died in police cells at the Davidson police station in 2013 after being dragged behind a police van. It's time now to take a break. We'll be back in a bit.
In Africa, mobile devices are tools to make payments, browse the internet, and keep governments in check with social media forums.
It's given an average African too much power in their hands.
And tech creativity is solving some of the continent's problems.
Everything is internet driven.
And on Network, we tell you how Africans are using technology and social media in their everyday lives.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom. Now, nearly 1 million people have now been affected by widespread flooding across Myanmar since June. Over 100 people have died and 1.2 million acres of rice fields have been destroyed. Rural areas and cities are being evacuated. Although flooding in the country is not unusual, this is the worst flood to hit Myanmar in decades. The floods were made worse by Cyclone Koman, which plowed through the country last week, causing further damage to the already deprived states. Now we are joined on Skype by the World Food Programme representative, Nicholas Joud. Nicholas, I thank you for making yourself available for this interview this morning.
Good morning, thank you.
I would just quickly like to hear from you. The World Food Programme has already helped more than 80,000 people within China. We see, just tell us about the current situation. We see that cities are being evacuated.
Yes, we already have provided assistance to more than 200,000 people across the country. The floods have been affecting 12 of the 14 states across the country, so it's quite spread. The situation is improving in the places that were first flooded, especially in the west and in the north. But new areas are being flooded in the southern parts, and the government is asking people to evacuate.
Nicholas, just in terms of we're talking finances to sustain what you are busy doing, how much is needed and how much more help will you need if you look at how long you're going to have to be assisting these people?
Well, to sustain our current emergency operations, we require $18 million in for the next 6 months.
And how are you looking at...
we already secured some of...
I'm so sorry, yes. How are you looking at generating those funds, Nicholas?
Well, it's being requested to the donors that normally support our operations. There are additional funds committed to support this emergency. So we hope we will manage to reach this level of funding to provide the necessary assistance to the affected population.
It must have been a challenge getting food to some of these people in some of the rural areas. What have the challenges been?
Well, challenges have mainly been about logistics, because with the floods, roads, bridges have been damaged or destroyed. Some mountainous areas have been affected by landslides, cutting off big areas of the country. So we've been working with the government and with our local partners to reach these areas. The World Food Programme benefits from different sub-offices across the country, so we are present in many of the affected areas. So we managed to deploy our staff quickly and to provide assistance in the first days after the floods hit the country.
Nicholas, we talked about the 1.2 million acres of rice fields that have been affected by the floods. What effect will this have on the economy, seeing that this is one of the country's key exports?
Yeah, the floods hit the country during the monsoon season, which is also the main period for agriculture and especially for rice production. So farmers planted their crops a few weeks before the floods hit, and estimations are on the high side for crops to be damaged or destroyed. The government is still compiling information on the quantities of crops that will be lost, and the government is also mobilizing its resources to provide support to the affected farmers, especially in the form of seeds. If this support is provided in the coming weeks, paddy fields will be able to be replanted. Otherwise, it will be too late, and farmers will have to wait for the next growing season.
Tourism officials are also concerned that the flooding will severely affect the tourism industry. What are we seeing in terms of that?
Well, I think so far the effects of the floods on the tourism industry has been have been minimal because the monsoon, the rainy season is also the low season for tourism. And the major touristic sites across the country have not been affected or very limited affected by the floods. So I don't think it will have a major impact on the tourism sector.
All right. And then, Nicholas, just now your plan moving forward, how long will you continue to help those displaced, those in need?
Well, it will depend from one region to another because people might not be able to go back to their places at the same time. It will depend also on the quantities of land that are totally destroyed and that farmers are able to replant or not. So we are aiming at the first support of 4 to 6 months, and we'll reassess the situation at the time of the rice harvest that will come in November, December to see what additional support or longer support might be needed.
Well, Nicholas, we thank you for the work that you are doing there, and we do hope that the situation improves very soon.
Thank you.
Now, a fatal shack fire has claimed 3 lives at Hope Bay in the Cape Peninsula. This is the 3rd incident in 2 days. Let's take a look at what you've been saying about this on social media. Please remember to send your views to us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Here we see the first tweet coming in saying, God be with the people of Hope Bay. Hashtag shack fire. Yes, we are indeed thinking of them. GXA says the whole family gone just like that. Hashtag shack fire. Shh, with a sad face. Then Ashmur says, hashtag shack fires are a daily occurrence. They need to be curbed to save poor lives. In South Africa, of course. Blackburn Joe says, when a shack fire happens, how does human settlement help? By erecting another shack? Last minute I checked. RDP were not for people under 40 to 44 years. Interesting there. Something we can follow up on, I think. So, now let's take a look at what is happening on our Newsroom Facebook page today. You'll see there that the Pastoral Agency of South Africa Board Chairperson Popo Molefe says they have begun a major cleanup campaign, which includes a board skills and qualifications audit across the entire company. Then the United Nations has confirmed almost 40 allegations of possible misconduct, including rape and shooting civilians by its personnel in the Central African Republic since the mission began operations in April last year. And 2 massive explosions caused by flammable goods ripped through an industrial area in the northeast port city of China late yesterday, killing 17 people and injuring as many as 400. Yes, we did also have a look at your tweet on that earlier. Remember, for more news, you can just look for our Newsroom Facebook page on Facebook. Just search for SABC Newsroom and you'll find all of those stories over there. Now, the Citizen newspaper editor Steve Motale has formally apologized to President Jacob Zuma by writing a column. Motale wrote that he's been party to the sinister agenda against Zuma and can only apologize for that. He also said it's time to admit that he's been party to the unfairness along with many of his colleagues. It's time now to take a break. We'll be back in a bit. Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Now, a high-powered government aviation and business delegation is in Mthatha today, addressing the multi-million rand upgrades already completed at the Mthatha airport. This airport is a critical hub for the northern part of the Eastern Cape and South Africa in general. More than 200 million rand has been spent to upgrade the airport buildings following last year's upgrade of the runway. The major concern, however, for this critical transport hub is the safety of planes when they land. Our SABC reporter Olwetu Sota is on standby to talk to the Superintendent General of the Eastern Cape Department of Transport. Quite a mouthful, Olwetu. Thank you for joining us this morning. Just tell us what's happening at the airport today.
Good morning, Aminia. I can tell you right now we are on the other side of the airport where the Premier is having a meeting with all the different stakeholders involved. It's the different MECs from the different departments. We've seen people from the Heritage Council as they are planning to make this airport reflect the Eastern Cape as the home of legend and keeping the heritage of the Eastern Cape. And also we've been to the site where we've seen that the airport is about 97% complete. But there's still some work done on the parking area. A lot of work still needs to be done in that particular area because at the moment what you'd find is that it's mostly rental vehicles that are there. However, to talk to us more about the issues around the Mthatha airport, I am now joined by the Superintendent General of the Department of Transport, Irene Mbolweni. SG, welcome. Can you just briefly tell us, we see that it's 97% progress that's already been done at the Mthatha airport. Are you guys satisfied with what has been done so far?
Thank you. We are very much satisfied with the progress that is happening at the airport. The terminal is almost finished. End of the month of September, we'll be switching from the old building into the new one. We are very comfortable with all the developments inside the new building. There's a space for all the offices that were in the old building inside the new building. It can be easily occupied immediately after the switch has done. The switch will be done, of course, in taking into cognizance the issues of electricity, the points for the IT systems, and various other things that we need to ensure that they are working properly as soon as we move over into the new building.
Now, SG, there have been concerns around the safety at the airport. We've seen flights being delayed previously due to standard lights that were not working properly. And there was also the issue of the livestock that you would find on the runway. How has the department dealt with those issues?
The issue of the lights has been attended to. We have done a walkabout in the runway, and we are busy looking at the specs, the proper specification for the lights. Remember, those lights are specified type of lights. It's not ordinary lights that need to be fitted there. In conjunction with that, we've also done a couple of study tours to some of the airports that are working and have proper runway lights. For an example, we went to the Cape Town and we were shown the runway lights, and we are looking at those specs in comparison with the type of lights that need to be installed at Mthatha Airport. We also visited George Airport. We also went to the runway. We also learned about their type of lights, and then we also look at that in conjunction with the specs that need to be fitted at Mthatha Airport. So that is work in progress, and also we need to ensure that everybody that is dealing with the lights understands the specifics that needs to be fitted at Mthatha Airport. Taking to cognizance the weather, the climate in this area, it's important for us to note that there's a bit of mist at some stages, and there's usually a heavy mist in the mornings. So our lights will also take into cognizance the climate issues in this area.
Now, as to the airport was supposed to be, the constructors were supposed to hand over the airport around May. We understand that there have been delays. Can you tell us about those delays, that the reasons why we actually will be handed over in September?
Some of the material that is used at the airport, as you see, this is a beautiful piece of architect. Is coming from overseas. So we had some delays due to the transportation of that material and also bringing it to this end of the province. And we've tried to manage that. And we also need to take into cognizance the fact that The delays were also due to understanding the weather conditions, and some of the days have to be stopped. We had to stop the building of the airport due to in order for us to look at the weather, so that we don't put some of the things while the weather is not looking good. So it will be an issue of a couple of days that we had to suffer. But now we're back on track. The weather is good, you can see, and we are back on track in full steam, and we'll be finishing just in the middle of September, and then we'll do the handover towards the end of September.
Right, Ashley, and lastly, the airport is very important for the economy of this area. What impact will it have on the Department of Transport having this airport fully running and goods being delivered here as well?
The airport is part of the integrated public transport master plan of the province, which includes rail, in buses, taxis and other modes of transport. That's one thing. We're not looking at the airport in isolation with the public transport master plan of the Eastern Cape. It's in conjunction with that. And also the airport, we're looking at it as an economic hub of this region, looking at issues of tourism, looking at issues of the building the economy in farming. There's a lot of farming happening around here. In all respect, farming, we're looking at also vegetables that are being grown in this area, very good produce that comes out of this area. We are also looking at ensuring that the airport is not in isolation of the business that is happening in this region. If you look at the Mthatha development, there's a development of malls, and we're ensuring that those malls get the support in terms of couriering their goods quickly to different country.
Thank you very much, SG. That was the Superintendent General of the Transport Department telling us about the developments that have been made at the Mthatha Airport. That's all we have for now. It's back to the studio.
Yes, thank you very much, Wethu. That, of course, is our SABC correspondent, all the way to Swarthout from the Eastern Cape. Of course, just bringing us in the picture with what those upgrades are at the Mthatha Airport. Now, 10 South African teams, including Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda and Zimbabwe, will participate in this year's annual Land Rover Africa Cup polo tournament that is set to take place at the Inanda Club in Sandton this weekend. The Land Rover Africa Cup promises to be a fiercely competitive tournament with 10 teams featuring world-class players at the top of their game. Ghana, the winners of the last year's closely fought tournament, will also be there to defend their title. To join us in studio today to talk a bit about this, we have two players, Zombi Tsotsetsi representing Ghana and Uday Kalan from Uganda. Gentlemen, I thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, thank you.
I have to be completely honest, Zombi, if I can start with you. When I think sport in Africa, it's not exactly polo that comes to mind, it's soccer. So just tell us, how big is the sport within Africa?
It's a big sport now, eh?
Yes.
Yeah, because there is a lot of different teams, especially here in South Africa. We have 9 provinces, so each one of those provinces, they all have many teams. So it's quite big, actually.
So tell me, you're representing specifically Ghana. How big is the sport in your country, and what levels are you competing there?
Yeah, in Ghana, it's a big, but not big like here in South Africa, because Ghana, they're just a few polo clubs. So here in South Africa, we have so many.
Uday, if I can ask you the same question, you're from Uganda. Just tell us a bit more about the sport in Uganda.
I think in Uganda, we just started playing few years ago. It's the first time Uganda has been invited to this tournament.
Yes.
So it's a big step for Uganda, and we look forward to playing this weekend. You know, there'll be a lot of teams from all over Africa. It's a big cup, and it'll be great camaraderie, great sportsmanship, and we hope to do well.
So you're saying this is a sport that definitely still is growing. How many youngsters do we see actually coming into these teams and competing?
I think earlier it was dominated by Southern Africa, but now as the economies of the other African nations are building, you know, we've got more polo coming in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and the more African teams that come and the more youngsters that come through the line, it's great. You know, it's a lot more people are interested in horses, you know, wanted to know the sport, learn the sport, and in the end, you know, tournaments like this promote the African nations polo.
Would you say South Africa and even African countries are on par with the rest of the world when it comes to polo?
I think in Eastern Cape, yeah.
Definitely in the Eastern Cape. Why the Eastern Cape though?
On Eastern Cape, that's where there is a lot of the good polo players there. There's a place called Plettenberg Bay.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but also here in Joburg, here in Inanda, there's a lot of good polo players there.
And you, Joe, would you say this is a sport that any person has the opportunity to walk into? Because we do have this tendency to kind of associate polo with, it's kind of like a rich man's game. So what are we doing to involve all classes in participating in this sport?
Yeah, I think it's got that elite tag, but I think as far as the awareness about horses and the sport reaches out further, and what we can do, especially in Uganda, in Kenya, in Eastern Africa, is to take it to the masses, and get more people who are interested about horses, promote them, help them, and I think that's the main growth area. We've got to take it to the masses, even though, as you said, it's considered a rich man's sport, but somebody who has the talent for horses or has the spirit and loves horses. Most welcome to join, and there's somebody to help him out always.
Yeah. And just tell me a bit about your personal stories. How did you get involved with the sport, actually?
I think maybe I'm lucky because I grew up on the farm. There was a small farm in Free State.
Yes.
On Fixbeck. Yeah. So it was the polo farm.
So would you say from a young age?
Yeah. I started when I was 11 years.
Yeah.
Yes. That's where I started how to look after the horses. And I met some different people to introduce me to the sport.
And what kind of relationship do you have to have with horses to kind of do a sport like this?
I think, yeah, it's a very intense relationship because in a polo match, 80% of the game is the horse, you know. And it's a relationship you build over the past few months training and your how you negotiate the horse in the tournament. So it's very important to have a very good relationship with the horse. So most of the African teams here who have traveled from other parts of Africa are playing on borrowed horses. So so we've over the last few days tried them and kept them.
How does that then change the dynamics of the game now that you're in another country and you're playing with the horse that you're not usually used to playing with?
Yeah, it definitely gives an edge to the South African teams who are playing their own horses, but I think the tournament's far bigger than that. It creates a lot of camaraderie.
Definitely.
And but we will try our best. We've got good horses. We will get used to them. We've got used to them in the last few days. We've got a day today as well. But
Ghana, they're the reigning champions. Quickly from you two, who's going to win and what can we expect from the weekend?
I think it's more interesting. It's very interesting because of if you have a look at those few past years, this year it's the bigger one because we had a lot of teams from African country, and some teams they here in South Africa. So I think it's going to be interesting this week.
Yeah, I think the South African teams have an edge, but of course Ghana, reigning champions. We are the underdogs, so we've got all to fight it for, but we'll give it our best try.
Well, gentlemen, best of luck to you. We're so happy to see these African teams competing in South Africa for this title. I just wish you the best of luck and have fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Well, yesterday the world celebrated International Youth Day under the theme Youth Civic Engagement, which emphasizes the involvement and inclusion of young people in building social cohesion and collective well-being. Let's just take a look on social media what you had to say about this. Please remember that you can send all your views to us at SABC Newsroom. HRH says, I believe in taking the attitude towards the world. That's an A+ attitude. My hope is to leave the world a little better than when I got here. Hashtag youth. Yes, I think we should all share those types of thoughts. This tweet says, youth is the time to seize opportunities, follow your dreams, be the change. Let's celebrate the spirit of youth. Hashtag International Youth Day. Very positive tweets coming through. Jenny says strategic thinking is the gateway to innovation. International Youth Day, that she's hashtagged there. The youth have so many opportunities today. NYDA says hashtag International Youth Day 2015. The theme, youth civic engagement and participation of youth essential to achieve sustainable human development. Definitely. Well, remember, Newsroom is broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park in Johannesburg every weekday morning between 9 and 10 o'clock. We are also streaming live on YouTube at that time, with the show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom, where we love it in the morning.